Welcome everyone. This is Dean Khagram from the Thunderbird School of Global Management, especially our Indian T-Birds. Good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're healthy and safe. We're gonna give everyone a couple of minutes to join so we can get the largest possible group together. Really, I'm grateful for everyone for joining, especially our panelists who will introduce shortly. So we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes. While you're joining, please do uh, put your name into the chat box, your year, and where you might be located. Anything else you want to add? We may also, as Ravi's asking us, we may have some students and prospective students join us, which would be wonderful. Sometimes also faculty and staff, even though it's quite early in the morning here in Arizona. So thank you again, welcome, and we'll get started in a couple of minutes. And just to remind everyone, that's wonderful, Abhishek. Thank you for getting us started with putting your name and your T-Bird affiliation into the chat. What a good group we have. So we'll give it about one more minute and get started. Please do, if you haven't already, put your name and location and T-Bird affiliation into the chat. It would be great to know who we have. We already have some questions. We'll come back to that in these questions in a second. If for questions, we can use the question and answer function, which is at the bottom of Zoom for those of you who are, experts, you know this, but for those who might be using this platform for the first time. Okay, why don't we get started? We have a good group. I want to welcome everyone again. I'm Dr. Sanjeev Khagram, the Director General and Dean of the Thunderbird School of Global Management. Really excited to have our alumni, students, prospective students, hopefully some faculty and staff have joined us as well, but also other partners in India and around the world. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. For us here in Arizona, as you know, it's the wee hours of the morning, but we're delighted and honored to be with all of you. Before we begin, as you can see, our discussion today is on the economic impacts and consequences of really COVID-19 in India. And of course, given the integrated nature of the global economy, by definition, we'll be talking about the world beyond India and the interconnections between India and the world and India. For me personally, this is obviously one of the Globinars webinars that I've been most looking forward to. Since the pandemic hit, the Thunderbird School has really been committed to three fundamental principles. One is the health and safety of all of our community members and anyone we can support and touch in our communities around the world, our students and faculty, our alumni and staff to start with of course. but also anywhere that we can make a difference. Second is to bring our Thunderbird global community together despite the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders and lockdowns through virtual means in every way we can, so that we still are socially connected. We are learning from each other. We're continuing to thrive because mental health is as important as physical health, and social connectedness is the foundations of that mental health. And then third is really to provide leadership, global leadership, which is our great mission and vision, to continue to advance sustainable and equitable prosperity worldwide through our thought leadership, through programs in the world. Just to give you an example, the Thunderbird Nairobi Center of Excellence is working closely with the African CDC, the governments of Kenya, Sierra Leone, and many others, private sector companies, to provide massive response to the COVID crisis across the continent. We know that across the world, T-Birds are doing incredible work. Some Indonesian alums have done fantastic work around providing support in terms of rebuilding houses and meals and so forth. We know this is happening in India and everywhere. Over the last 10 weeks, we've held, I can't remember anymore, about 25, maybe 30 Globinars. First, with alumni around the world, really just reflecting on their experiences with the pandemic, and then increasingly around major issues. This past week, for example, we had on Thursday, President Luis Moreno of the Inter-American Development Bank really talking about his own experience of being our wonderful Thunderbird alum, being the president of a multilateral organization, Regional Development Bank, what has happened in Latin America over the last 15 years, obviously now what he sees going forward as he's stepping down in this pandemic, how he tried to lead that institution. On Friday, we had a wonderful Globinar with MUFG Bank on leading with compassion in the global finance sector. And then on Saturday, we had a panel with former President Mary Robinson of Ireland and former head of Amnesty International, Kumi Naidu. So this leads us to this incredible panel we have and session. We have an incredible set of panelists, our three distinguished alums, or actually four. Nikki is also going to be joining us to talk about our work in India. I think for me, one of the early casualties of the crisis, and by and large, we are all, most of us, very blessed on the personal and family, and luckily on the health side, was that my trip to India was canceled, which I had been looking forward to very much. So that's on the top of the queue. Once we can travel again internationally, I'm looking forward to coming to visit all of you there and advancing our work together. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We're going to have them speak in this order, and then Nikki will be fourth, and then we'll open up for question and answer. I think you all know me. I don't think we're going to spend much time on that, but let me introduce Nikhil. No, go ahead. You can go to Nikhil, please, Nikki. So Nikhil Arora is the Managing Director and VP, Vice President of GoDaddy, a startup advisor, board member, former Asia operations head at WeWork, and former manager director Intuit India. He leads strategy, business growth, operations, and customer care for GoDaddy in India as its vice president and managing director. In his role of the world's leading platform dedicated to small businesses, Nikhil is passionate about helping small businesses and entrepreneurs establish and grow their ventures. And of course, we're looking forward to hearing from Nikhil because GoDaddy has this unique window into what's happening with small businesses, not only across India, but all over the world. And we know this, when we think about the impacts, it really has been on the front lines. It has been with small businesses to start off with. So without further ado, I'll probably just go have Nikhil, you speak, and then introduce Ravi and then Michael when you're done. So we welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us, taking out time out of your busy schedule and from your family. And then Nikhil, just as you start, maybe you could, each of you could sort of recall one wonderful, fond memory of your times at Thunderbird. I think while we're talking about these challenging times, we also want to celebrate and remember all the joyful times that we've had and also going forward. So Nikhil, over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, Mike, Ravi, Nikki, and it's a pleasure to be part of this wonderful, esteemed family of Thunderbird. You asked for one fond memory, Sanjeev. I think three flashed right in my head. First was the pub. I know the pub has its own journey line and life, and I think anybody who was there during the pub time cannot forget how many startup ideas or how many failed ideas came out of that pub. But that was, one of the most wonderful ones. And the other two, actually, we were the first batch to actually bring in cricket into the Thunderbird setup. So we actually started a league of cricket, and we were also the first Indian club to host our India Day at the pub. So pub was the epicenter for everything. So it's been fabulous. And Sanjeev, thank you for doing a great job since you've come on board. We are extremely grateful and passionate to see you doing wonderful work to the school. With that, I think I'll just, and Sanjeev just put me on time so I could just stick to, a time frame in spirit of being, collaborating.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Well, why don't we take 5 minutes, Nikhil? And if you need a couple of more, but that way we can each of you have 5 minutes and really open up for dialogue and discussion. Okay.
Wonderful. So, as we all are, really experiencing, and I talk about this world seems to be that we are all fresh college graduates out in the world trying to figure out, what is this world right now, right? Because it's actually, if you think about it, we haven't seen this degree of uncertainty in our lifetime, or perhaps even, way before that. So everything which is happening both in business and personal front is, under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Secondly, I think if you think about what's happening at a business level, right, especially if we relate to India or that applies to anywhere in the world, right, the GDP is going to be really, really very, like, for example, in India, we're looking at 1 to 2%. We're looking at unemployment rate close to 10%. And we are looking at entire disruption of supply and demand, right? And so this begs questions of what does the industry do with it? And I think, unfortunately, it's good choices of bad choices because there is no clear answer. And when you start boiling it down to industries, and I'll go level more on the SME entrepreneur side, but just at a macro level, if you think about the biggest industry in India, which is getting impacted, is going to be agriculture. It contributes about close to $260 million and the 60% of the workforce is agriculture, and the entire supply demand is disrupted. And India's majority of the labor force actually is in that agricultural sector. So what's going to happen to there and what the government does is one question, and I'll come up with some perspective. Second is small business, right? Small business and entrepreneurs contribute about 30% of output to the GDP, employ about 120 million people today. The forecast is that at least 25 to 50% of those businesses will either die or all those people will be out of work. That is a very, very, I would say, depressing stat when you think about it. And then if you add on other industries like hospitality, retail, aviation, automobiles, look at the consensus of CEOs. Everybody's saying that this year we should at least expect 15 to 20% of revenue hit across industries, and some will be more hurt than the other. Half those CEOs are also saying that there will be at least 30 to 40% job losses in these industries. So when we think about small business today, right? I mean, what we have been hearing from our customers is, one is, they are under extreme pressure from both sides. They have been asked to keep people employed, but on the other hand, they are running out of cash. And so the challenge they are facing is, how do they keep people on the payroll so they continue to survive? Otherwise, they're going to die, and these jobs are not going to come back. And that's where I think, the government is stepping in, but I think there is a huge kind of uncertainty for small business to say, what does our package look like? They need loans, they need cash, they need tax subsidies, they need some breaks from a lot of compliance requirements for them to sustain for the next 2 to 3 months. Secondly, they're also sharing with us that there's a lot of interest from businesses who were never online, wanting to come online, which is really what you're seeing across GoDaddy around the world. I mean, in March alone, we saw 93% surge in how do I get my business online? How do I build a website? Even for smaller towns in India, tier 2, tier 3 towns to say, hey, how do I build my online presence because I have been offline? So we see this trend actually accelerating digitization. Perhaps what was happening in the last 4 or 5 years will happen in the next 4 or 5 months. And I think what's that's prompting a lot of businesses to rethink their strategy. And as GoDaddy is in center of it, we've started a couple of platforms called Open We Stand, where we've put resources for these small businesses to come and find different ways to come online and grow online and so on. Thirdly, I think from a government point of view, it's a very difficult situation because expenditure has really gone up, revenues are not coming, and it's a balance between health and economics. And I think as I see it for this year, I think we would have to look at a scenario where the fiscal deficit is going to go to 5, 6, 7%, because you can't pull back expenditure on health right now. Health and infrastructure is a priority. We can't pull back expenditure on if we are providing subsidies to the industries which need to kind of sustain employment. And also, government's not generating revenue because no tax revenues are coming. A lot of activity is stopped. So I think the solutions in my mind are following, right? One is, I think we need to start looking at a scenario where some of the non-required expenditure projects, right, the government would have thought about, need to be kind of put on hold or shelved, because that's, those are kind of, I would say, non-essential projects. They were essential projects 3 months ago, but non-essential projects. I think we have to look at central bank to perhaps bail us out a bit, which means if you have to print more money, I know it can cause inflation, but the scenario is such that it requires that. And I think thirdly, giving necessary breaks to small businesses where they can, right? Whether it's waiving off certain loans if the small business qualifies, and or providing cash relief. Because what small businesses are worried about is that the money is not reaching them. The government is doing its bit and in trying, the intent is right, but it's not reaching the bit. So how all that kind of comes together for them to survive and sustain, right? Because first is they have to survive, then only they'll be able to do anything with employment. So summing it up, I think we're looking at a scenario where there will be significant job losses. We're looking at a scenario where it'll be, if not a degrowth, but flat to 1 to 2%. And I think the best way the government can really right now pitch in is to really find these cash, whether it's to central bank and whether it's to maybe even looking at lending from foreign sources, and also getting the central bank to bail out. And lastly, I think states have to become more active right now. I think never in the history of at least our times that the public-private partnership has been so important, both at an economic level and a health infrastructure level. Because right now, if you think about it, every activity happening is at a very hyper-local level. The health system of a city, of a local, within your 10, 15 kilometer is what's surviving and sustaining you. So I think if I think about the futuristic approach, public-private partnership will certainly come back. It was talked a lot a few years back and then kind of went into the shadows. I think it's going to come back. And also it's going to accelerate digitization of many industries, which has not happened in the past, including, small businesses. Education is one which will see a disruption, fitness industry is one which is a disruption. So I think with that, I will kind of close in saying that the most important thing for our employees to sustain is wellness, because having your employees be mentally healthy, it's a tough time for everybody, for children, for moms, for dads, for everybody, and there is no formula. And the more the companies can do, right, the more the employers can do to help, and kind of ease that out, will go in a long way to both build loyalty, empathy, and your, and kind of your brand engagement, not only with the employees, with your customers.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. I mean, I think that, there are so many important points you made, but I just want to emphasize 2 or 3 of them. One was this point that you all can see about this acceleration of digitization by even small businesses going online in India. We've seen this around the world, and as you know, at the school, since I've joined, we've made a very, very big priority to make sure that our students to our executives really can be successful in a digital transformation world. And we completely agree that what happened 3, 4, 5, took 3 or 4 or 5 years is now taking 3 or 4 weeks or 3 or 4 months, and that acceleration is happening. The second is really, your last point about the mental health of our employees and what companies can do. Remarkable how much, right, even though we're distributed, companies have this incredible, in some sense, influence over the mental health, not only of their employees, but therefore their families and the communities behind. And then third, though, is really what's the future of public policy and public-private partnerships. I hope we can come back to all of three of those and other great points you made. With that, if I could go to the next slide and welcome Ravi to. Ravi Kaushik is partner at Waterbridge Ventures and a 40 under 40 alternatives investment professional. He has over 10 years of professional experience, including 7 years of private equity, venture capital, investment banking, and corporate finance across various sectors: technology, consumer, internet, infrastructure, healthcare, financial service, banking, education, manufacturing. It's that incredible breadth of experience across sectors. And Ravi, as we go over to you, it'd be wonderful to hear, as to complement what Nikhil shared, how you see different sectors faring in the Indian economy. How is that similar to, different from what you might be seeing out around the world in terms of, retraction and then medium to longer term consequences? But I'm sure you'll have much to share with us. Welcome, Ravi. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev. Again, pleasure to be here, everyone. I think let me start with giving a broad macro investment perspective, and then I'll give a more of a VC perspective, and that should cover the breadth of sectors that we have looked at, right? I think the broader perspective is that in the last 1.5 months, the market initially fell about 30-35%, incredibly went back 10% in the last, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks. So we are netted about 20% down. I think the expectation for India's GDP is anywhere from 0 to 1% growth, somewhere in that between. I'm not an economist, so it's hard to predict where that will come in. Gold has been up and down, which is incredible because Indians tend to rush to gold, but that's not been the case. Oil has been in negative territory, which is probably the most amazing of what's happening in the last, let's say, two odd months. So I think the question really begs from an investment perspective from this is that we don't know what's going to happen, right? And it is fairly easy, and when I say easy, it's a relative term here, to say what the first order impact of this is, which is, your shops are shutting down, so your retail is impacted, aviation, hospitality, food, restaurants, those are impacted, yes, but what are the third order impact that this is going to have is incredibly hard to imagine and actually even to assess. And I'll give you a simple example, right? I think TCS recently came out and said that by 2025, they want 75% of their workforce working from home, right? While that is phenomenal in terms of cost savings, what are the second order impacts from that? What does it mean to real estate prices? What does it mean to commercial real estate? What does it mean to caterers who supply to these? What does it mean to transportation that take these employees from home to office? Does that mean that there'll be reverse migration of people from major cities in India to smaller towns? Does that mean a fall in commerce around these major commercial hubs that have been built? We've also been seeing, for instance, massive humanitarian crisis around migration of workers back to their hometowns. Now, what does that really mean? Does that mean that when we're ready to open up, where is the labor? And that labor is critical to keep India's engines turning. Where is that labor going to come from? Are they going to just come back within a month? Are they going to take 3 months, 4 months? Are people going to go to buy in shops? Are they going to get a haircut? Am I going to go watch a movie? So the biggest challenge right now is, intuitively you can tell what the first order impact is. It's almost impossible to imagine what the second and third order impact is. And that is the biggest problem right now. because it's very hard to assess what will happen even 6 months from now. Forget 3 months. Right? So that being the macro context, right? Let's come to the world of venture capital where I spend, that's my bread and butter. That's where we spend most of my time on. And I think, and we have a portfolio of 16, 17 companies, right? And if you see, right, I think the first 3 weeks we spent enormous amounts of time with our portfolio companies trying to understand what is it that we can do. And the advice was very different to different companies. For example, advice to edtech companies, which are online education, online gaming, was, guys, you have capital right now. It actually makes sense to spend some money in advertising, acquire customers because rates have fallen, and grow your business, right? And see how that goes. Of course, don't go overboard, but be careful. It probably makes sense. And we have seen tremendous growth in some of those sectors. We have fintech companies, which are SME lending and consumer lending, and there the business is down to zero. Disbursement has been stopped completely. 100% of the workforce in these companies is pressed on collections. And you can imagine collections are hard right now because in India, and RBI gave a moratorium on payments, which means that all borrowers to start with assumed that they can completely stop their payments, right? A lot of them had the intent, but not the ability. A lot of them have the ability, but not the intent. And you can imagine collections have fallen 50, 60% to what they used to be in normal times, because beyond calling them up, there's nothing that you can do. You also have to be humanitarian in these times and understand genuine cases where people can't pay. So fintech is massively hit. We have B2B e-commerce, which is connecting suppliers with distributors, suppliers with consumers, and business is down to zero because the entire country is shut. The single biggest message that I was able to give to my portfolio companies was, unless you are in online education, gaming, healthcare, etc., conserve cash, be kind to your employees, be kind to your customers, do the best you can. Don't try and lay off anybody. I think people were incredibly supportive when we said, guys, we'll have to take some sort of a salary cut. And people were like, you know what, we get it. And what we did was, for instance, in some companies, we said, if we're giving let's say a 30% salary cut, we said the balance that we're cutting will be given to you by our ESOPs in the company. So you benefit when you stay with us through these difficult times. And the support has been incredible. But taking a step back, Dr. Sanjeev, I think the challenge has been that, one, is this going to come back again? We don't know. Will there be a second wave, a third wave? We don't know. How will human sentiment be towards this when things open up? Will I go buy things? Will I behave normally? Probably not, but again, we don't know. With the massive joblessness, will it impact demand? Perhaps yes. When will demand come back? We don't know. So with so much of uncertainty, it's just incredibly difficult to predict and assess the second, third, fourth order impacts of what's happening. And consequently, the only sane suggestion right now is perhaps to live week to week, conserve cash, be very careful, be prudent, be safe, and see how things go. I think the biggest test right now, especially in terms of investment, is not your intuition on investing, but actually patience. Can you be patient long enough to have the ability to hold on to enter when you have the right time, back the right teams, back the right companies, and have the ability to hold on for whatever comes after?
Thank you so much, Ravi. I mean, I think your points about second, third, fourth, who knows how many levels of orders of effects are absolutely on the mark. The fact that, there's so many unknowns 6 months out, even 3 months out. And certainly if we think about a year or beyond that. I mean, I do wonder if you could share one more thought. This is a kind of personal question, but here and around the world, there is a big discussion, as you know, about theaters never coming back. And, I wonder, what's your perspective on that in India? It's such an important part of the national culture about, how people connect socially. I mean, beyond theaters, arts and culture is really suffering, right? But our cinema, is such an important part of Indian life. And so, any thoughts on that in particular?
No, great question, Dr. Sanjeev. And I think my personal view is, it's not a question of if, it's only about when. I think theaters will coming back. Movies, entertainment plays an integral part of everybody's lives from their daily rigmarole. It's not a question of if, it's when. And that's the big question.
And I think your point about the migration back to hometowns, villages is incredibly powerful, and what that's going to mean in terms of social fabric of those communities in the short term, but then also the potential for labor in the medium term. So thank you so much, Ravi. Let's go over to Michael Koch. Get the next. So Michael, welcome as a VP of India at Boeing Defense, Space and Security, and lead sales and marketing and Boeing's defense and space business in India. As our team was sharing with Michael, again, before the pandemic hit, we were just finishing signing a major partnership with Boeing to launch a series of aviation leadership and management academies around the world. And we're looking forward to continue that. We're still doing that online. So really great to be reconnected with you. Michael specialties are in marketing and sales, strategy, program management and execution, international business, government and customer relations, aerospace and defense, growth, risk and opportunity management, strategic planning, commercial sales, and so many other things. Michael, you know, the aviation, I'm sure you'll talk about that, about India specifically as the focus is here, but the aviation sector more broadly. One could ask a similar question of the aviation sector. I asked, you know, in some sense more personally about the, you know, film industry and theaters. You know, what's going to happen? How do you see that? But love to hear your perspectives relative to Nikhil and Ravi about, you know, what's happening in India, how you all see the next, you know, quarter to beyond, and obviously also, you know, your perspective on the global aviation industry. Welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'm really thrilled to join the virtual discussion here. I think some excellent comments and insights made by my co-panelists so far. I'll just kind of maybe sprinkle in a few other perspectives, right? And so for those who are outside of India right now who are joining us, you know, you may not appreciate, you know, the degree to which it's a very conservative approach, you know, in terms of the lockdown. And so what you see in the industry, and as my co-panelists had indicated, is really just a freezing of transit of people. And so much of India's economy is the informal economy. You know, there's a lot of folks really dependent on daily wages to make ends meet and really stay above subsistence level. And, you know, that's really been very significant impact to society at large. Living here in New Delhi, of course, you can see, as you mentioned, the migration of people, so many people here for work in Delhi, having a very difficult time going back to their villages. And then the questions about what does the new normal look like? You know, I think we're starting to see some movement. Even today, I noticed, interestingly, you know, increase in traffic out on the roads, you know, just incremental loosening of the lockdown. But maybe for folks outside of India, I think it's been very important for public health, but economically, you know, the impacts of really such a conservative approach, you know, certainly being felt as we're discussing today. Maybe I can offer a bigger company perspective. So, you know, for us, and the reason I've come here, and now this is my 5th year living here in New Delhi, is because this is an exciting place in aviation and for the Boeing company. We're not just selling and delivering products to India, but we're growing. You know, this is now the 2nd largest site in the world outside the United States for the Boeing company. So, you know, it's engineering talent, it's many small companies. We have over 200 suppliers, small, medium-sized companies, larger companies, commercial, defense, analytics, IT, you name it. And it's a very fast, kind of steep growth trajectory that we have here. So we get to see kind of a sampling, if you will, across the really large kind of Indian industrial houses, if you will, and how they're affected, and also a lot of the small mom and pop companies where we see as trade between the United States and India has increased, and again, we want to get back on that vector, back on track. You know, India's become a very important part of the global supply chain, not just the digital supply chain, where obviously it's played a leadership role for some time, but even manufacturing. You know, we and companies like ours really have championed Indian manufacturing, and we have sole source suppliers. And right now you have the inability to move physical goods. Whether those goods are, you know, produce, you know, getting it to market from the farms, as we just heard about, you know, people who need liquidity in order to plant the next round of harvest, or whether those are finished, aircraft fuselage, that needs to reach a factory in the United States, which is still up and running. And there just simply isn't the movement of any finished goods, and all the factories are shuttered, around the country, unless it's an essential industry, which is very narrow definition in terms of typically medical defined. So, what we see here is, again, a pretty stark situation that we're in now, and looking at ways, I think, as we look to the very near future of how we can comply, obviously with a focus on people's health and a focus on keeping the curve flat as we can, and not having any W-shaped curves, to start to open up some of the industry, and for example, we're just one anecdotal example, but we've gone through and re-engineered many of the manufacturing processes. So we could have maybe 25% of the mechanics typical who would be working on the product on a given day, to again, maintain safety, maintain social distancing. So these are some of the ways that we've tried to, plan for what I think will be a very slow, at least in the manufacturing sector and finished goods sector, very slow, orderly, structured recovery. People slowly returning to offices, factories really coming in, maybe 25% staffing, these type of levels. And I think, as we've heard already in my prior discussion, it's going to really affect GDP significantly. India may not have the ability to do deficit spending, for example, and create as much fiscal stimulus. So I think liquidity is going to be key, including for small companies, loan forgiveness, short-term loan forgiveness, whether it's in agriculture sector, other small businesses. I think that's going to be what's really needed from the central government, from RBI, those types of programs, so people know it's available to them. They push capital into the markets and have very permissive kind of forgiveness programs in terms of any interest, etc. I would say what we've seen also, obviously the digital economy is more resilient, and so for us as a company, everybody's working from home. We've tried to really migrate a lot of the engineering work, services, IT-based work has been more portable. From a human side, again, it's a matter of really just checking in with everyone and how they're doing. What's the work-life balance look like? How do you create that camaraderie and understanding of challenges any of the employees are going through, while we get work done and while we do our very best to be productive and to change how we structure and order our work, to keep moving forward, which is really what we have to do, and really what we want to do well, so that we can keep getting quickly back onto the growth trajectory we were on, for not just for Boeing, but really for aviation industry in India. Again, this is right now the third largest and fastest growing aviation market in the world. So clearly, as has been indicated, there will be a new normal in terms of commercial aviation. We don't see as fast a rebound. Obviously, it's been a perfect storm in terms of how this pandemic has affected worldwide travel, and so we're sort of a bellwether company in that respect. So we'll see. It's going to be a very slow recovery, I think, for not just the airlines, but really all of those, second and third order companies, and how those are all affected. Again, first things first, I think we still have a little ways to go before we get there. So unless there, I look forward to any questions folks might have. Again, I'll just say that in the midterm, I'm still very much an optimist. Again, I think there's more tough times to come economically here. I think this is an incredibly resilient economy and workforce. And so I'm still excited, to roll up our sleeves and see what we can all do collectively to shorten that recovery curve here.
Thank you so much, Michael. If I could ask you one more question, and we're starting to get some great questions on the question and answer. I'm going to come back to them after we go to Nikki. Actually, I'm going to ask you two more questions and go back to Ravi. One question is, Boeing, like you said, was, in some sense, farther along and moving to India in terms of supply chain and manufacturing and so forth and so on. There's a lot of discussion now, given what's happened, that much more, manufacturing will move from particularly China to India manufacturing will move over. You know, given your insight into the industry there and more generally, any views on that specifically about the sort of diversification of global supply chain and particularly India benefiting over the medium term, given what's happened with the pandemic?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we see that ABC, as they say, anywhere but China, sort of more of a political approach that some countries have. Yeah, I think in general, there have been a lot of important reforms that have occurred. So if you kind of go pre-pandemic, if you will, there were a lot of impediments, I think, to making manufacturing really as competitive as we've seen in sort of the engineering and the IT sectors, for example, in India. And some of those structural reforms have been occurring really over the last few years. We certainly tried to champion them. And I still see that general trend moving in the right directions. Less bureaucracy, less kind of unique state-driven regulatory regimes. I mean, very, very difficult to initiate business here on a large scale, to manufacture, permits, et cetera. So more streamlining. And while some of the reform has occurred at the center, I'd say a lot of the states have really led the innovation. And it's almost a competition at the state level that we, of course, try to cheer them all on and helping them sort of each incentivize and out-incentivize one another to attract business. So I think that's been a really healthy dynamic. And I do see that, again, India has many great inherent advantages that should make it a hub for manufacturing around the world. And it hasn't even come close yet to reaching its destiny in that respect, is my view. Again, we have an incredible technical workforce. It's not just engineering, it's really across all disciplines. I mean, you'll find talent in almost every function. Companies look for it, and innovation, and so I think there's a lot of, the English language. I mean, there's so many things you tend to overlook that really should put India on a much firmer footing as being kind of one of the big lions in various sectors of manufacturing should be one of them. So I think we'll get back there. And people like me, what I feel like my mission right now is to shorten that curve and to do the best I possibly can to maintain continuity so that, companies still see India as very low risk, whether it's us, our suppliers, tier 1, tier 2 companies. I sort of personally want to be a champion for it. And I think it's coming. We will just have a little setback, maybe for the next 6 months to 1 year, depending on how quickly it goes.
Okay, and before I go over to Nikki, we let you and Ravi, a fond memory of Thunderbird for you, and then I'm coming to you, Ravi. You have to share a fond memory of Thunderbird.
I'll say for me, of course, I mean, the pub.
Yeah.
And so I love his comment that many bad ideas were also hatched at the pub. There's no doubt about that. I'm sure a few of them are mine. But, and I'll say, I did consulting for Thunderbird in Buenos Aires, and really just had an outstanding opportunity to work in a different sector and across a different language. It was all in Spanish, which I was really learning while I was at Thunderbird, kind of adding another language. And what a wonderful opportunity, and really to kind of live it out while I was there, taking classes, but also doing paid work for a client. So that was another highlight that comes to mind.
Okay. And I think you all know our T-Birds, both alumni and current students and also prospective students, that the pub and the global headquarters is well underway. We're still, construction workers are essential here in Arizona, so we're still continuing to build. If you want to see the live stream of the building, you can go on T-Bird Connect, and we're going to have a spectacular pub on the 5th floor. So over to you, Ravi Bhai. What was your fond memory of Thunderbird before we go over to Nikki and the questions?
Look, the pub is the most obvious answer, so let's assume that's a given. I think outside of the pub, I was part of the soccer team. We used to practice 4 or 5 times a week. I think we went to tournaments. We went to Berkeley for an annual tournament where we used to play against other business schools. I think we played in some local tournaments in Tempe, if I'm not mistaken. So really enjoyed that apart from the pub. I think just the brotherhood, the camaraderie, the joy of playing soccer. Brilliant, loved it.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Ravi. So we're going to go over to Nikki. Nikki Choksi is our representative for Thunderbird and ASU in India on the educational front.
Hi, Dean Khagram.
And Nikki, maybe you could share a little bit about your perspective on what's going on with education, particularly higher education, because of the pandemic and what we might be seeing into the future. And then we'll open up to the questions that we're starting to get on the Q&A. Nikki?
Absolutely. I won't take too much of our time here. I know this is not the entire focus, but in the last 3 years, during which time I've been recruiting actively based here on the ground in India, there has been quite a dramatic shift in terms of the perception of the modalities of education, right? Specifically for a master's degree program abroad. So when I transitioned from our Glendale campus to Bangalore, which is where I'm based today, the mentality was, well, there's nothing that stands up against the experience that a student can get in person on the campus in Phoenix, or whether it be in Glendale or in Phoenix. With COVID-19, with the pandemic, what we're starting to see more and more is students, and especially this generation, which is, like my panelists said, very resilient. They're starting to understand the immediate effects of wanting to pivot, or needing to pivot rather, at least in the near term. So you're seeing a lot more different types of modalities being offered by colleges, universities. ASU is a great example of that, Thunderbird. So while classes are set to be for the foreseeable future, as of today, I should say, it's a moving target, so to speak, to be conducted in person, there's obviously a set, there's an array of options that are being devised. Now, whether that is in terms of offering a course online, offering a hybrid course, which is partially in person, partially digital, etc. I think that with Thunderbird, backed by ASU's presence in India, this is a great time to be starting, or I should say continuing on this trajectory towards building that India hub that maybe Dean Khagram, you can speak a little bit more about if we have some time. But from the recruitment perspective, I have seen a lot more students having that curiosity piqued to the point where they're asking themselves those questions which they would have asked themselves later in the admissions process, such as how am I preparing myself to be recession proof by completing or pursuing this degree, rather than I just need another stamp on my resume, which obviously there's plenty of students from both sides, of course. I think at a fundamental level, there's two two trajectories that I see here. One is more large scale, kind of 30,000 feet view, where institutions, colleges and universities, whether they're public or private, based in India, are starting to realize the importance of not only offering other digital offerings, modalities. So the modality in itself is changing, but at a larger level, how can I, for example, as an institution that is, established here in India, understand to form more opportunities, more collaborations abroad with universities in the US and the UK, et cetera, and how do we capitalize on each other's, competencies, so to speak. So when you speak from a strictly recruitment point of view, whereas when you talk about enrollment, we want to ensure that there is a pipeline of students, that there's collaborative efforts that are going above and beyond just that student focus, that are adding those layers onto it. For example, faculty research, student research. How do you conduct immersion programs that are hybrid rather than completely in person? So I think it is a dynamic situation right now, and a lot of, I'll give you an example and I'll end with that, is a lot of my work, which used to be in person. We would be traveling for at least 1 or 2 weeks per month, speaking to students at different events, working with our Education USA partners here on the ground, etc. A lot of that, in fact, most of it, if not all, has become digital. So whether that's offering an informational webinar, all the way to offering a masterclass with a professor to help a student understand what it's like to be in a program. So I'll leave it there, and I think we have plenty of great questions to work off of in the Q&A.
If I may go out of turn, sorry, education is very close to my heart, and Sanjeev, you may not know, but yeah. I launched Laureate Education in Asia, so that name is familiar to Thunderbirds in a very interesting way, but I'll keep it that. And also at GoDaddy, we have an education initiative called GoDaddyAcademy.com. The questions I want to throw back at you guys, just to kind of probe further, is one, India till date does not have a Foreign University Act. That means no foreign university can actually grant a degree in India. There are ways around it, but there's no act, right? So now I think it's a great time to actually, collectively with other US or UK universities to push for that. Secondly, I think just as I think about future, to me, there may be many small campuses versus one big campus, right? So I think that's the way the direction Thunderbird is going. Like there's an India campus, there's maybe a campus in Europe, there's a campus in US. Now, how do you keep the quality of the faculty? Because a lot of students, when they want to do this, that's the number one question, right? They want to go for that experience, that faculty, right? So less of an answer but a question. I wanted to throw that out because I'm very close to this subject and it's really fascinating to me.
Well, no, I'm glad you jumped in, Nikhil, and I will save the Thunderbird. I'll do some things at the end and I'll answer some of those questions. And we have some other ones about Thunderbird and where we're headed with ASU. But I think just the one I won't end up spending a lot of time, but I think it would be great if we could work with our alums across India is about, the Foreign Universities Act. I think that would be fantastic and it would be a game changer for India and for all of us. So I think that's a fantastic point. Let me go to some of the questions, and Atul asked a question about international students. So we'll hold that one because that's part of the closing. I want to go to Jayraj. What signals or tractions are you seeing in the digitization of government or its public sector, both in the short term, i.e. being able to manage the dance of unlocking, and longer term, i.e. to sense, respond, prevent the next crisis? So it's more on digitization and also response and trying to think about the waves that may come. I'm gonna share a couple of the questions or three of the questions and then open it up back to the panel so we can get some, sort of flow here. And then Mohammed says, has our earlier global economy become much more manifested than actuals? And hence the reason for the lost equilibrium is the economy across industries. Mohammed, I'm not clear what you mean there, so you might want to add a little bit, but perhaps our panelists might have a sense. Nikhil just told me that small scale are in big trouble, and I understand that. But why is the government doing nothing for that? Just 3 months loan installments are deferred, and that also with additional interests. He proposes that it should be done for at least a year. So I think the broad question is, can government do more? Given what Michael said, which all of you said, there's not a lot of fiscal space for the Indian government, right? So what can they do, particularly to support small business? And then I'm going to hold on the questions around education. And then Shivanji says, could you please tell how would the IT industry particularly be affected due to the pandemic in the coming year? So let's take those three, go around, and then we'll take a few more. So I'll go back to you, Nikhil, and we'll just go around to Ravi and Michael. So Nikhil, you don't have to answer all of them. You can pick, any ones that, you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I'll just give a short perspective on a couple of them and then pass back along. I think specific to, Atul's question, I'm a big believer of crowdsourcing. And if you look at how much crowdsourcing funding has been raised, to help, whether you talk about daily migrant laborers or anybody, right? It has crossed any threshold we could all imagine, right? Just last night, Bollywood came together and raised, over 60 lakh rupees in 1 hour. So I believe while the government obviously has its hand tied because of fiscal deficit, government should also let this become a little bit of a public-private partnership, right? Where the crowdfunding can actually, there could be a crowdfunding avenue for small businesses because there are people who want to help and small things add up to big. And you can see from all the funding platforms, which have been able to raise money for the end consumer. So in that sense, one is, yes, the government needs to rethink and act fast because the uncertainty is really driving small businesses crazy. We hear that every day that, hey, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? So we extend them 3, 4, 5 months of lifeline, but ultimately they need the cash. But I think the government should start more actively reaching out to the private sector and looking at public-private, platforms to raise money because there is a lot of right intent, and also make it very transparent that the money is reaching, right? Because right now there's a lot of funding coming, but I think the question everybody asks is it reaching the end, end kind of a person who needs it. So that's on that, but clearly I think more needs to be done on that. And on the government one quickly, I think the good thing the government did, starting a few years back was digitization paths, right? Everything with at least Prime Minister Modi approach on, making a lot more, getting a lot of government offices, a lot of, like for example, like I just give you an example, hey, I'm in Gurgaon, my parents are in Delhi, I need to get a a pass to get there to go see them. It didn't take me a lot to just go on a website, apply for it. I got, whether I get a yes or no, but I can get that going, right? So I think the good thing is the government has, done a good job putting that kind of, infrastructure in place. And I think that would just only help and accelerate where we are today, including the latest app, right? The government launched the app about COVID tracking and so on. So those are good proof points that government has done good work, thinking in the past, not now, but they're bearing fruits now.
I've heard about the app. Of course, they're happening around the world. I mean, in Australia, in 24 hours, 70% of Australians signed up for the app. What's the uptake, Nikhil, after Ravi, Michael, colleagues with the app in India that's just been recently launched? Are people signing up?
Just quickly, I think they're actually, like, I'll give you my apartment complex. Like, if you don't have the app, you can't go for a walk. As simple as that. So the kind of sign up rate is pretty high because the apartment complexes or your complexes who manage you want to make sure you're being a good citizen of your complex. So I don't know the exact number, Ravi or Michael, you may know, but I think it's become already 300 million downloads is what I last heard, but I think it could be more than
phenomenal. That. Okay. Over to you, Ravi. Any of the questions or any of the reflections on what Nikhil or Michael might have said after you? So Ravi?
Yeah, I think broadly first on the government, I think the government did start the digitization drive a few years ago, but I think right now the government is doing the best they can. I think the app is one step forward in the current situation, but I think it's a bit too early to ask what are they doing to make sure this doesn't happen again. I think they're probably just fighting fire on a day-to-day basis right now to figure out what do we do today, what do we do tomorrow. I think once this settles down, it's probably there will be somebody within the government to sit down and figure out what do we do next to make sure this doesn't come again. Right? And I think specifically to Shivangi Singh's question on the IT industry, I think the IT industry has 2-3 elements to this right now. I think one is, I think there will be some element of slowdown, especially most of Indian IT industry's revenues come from outside the country, mostly US and Europe, right? So as large industries and their digitization priorities slow down, their spend slow down, there'll be an automatic impact on Indian IT as well. I think that's a given. But I think apart from that, I think very specifically what's also happening is because of the work from home situation, high data security, high criticality projects, which is government, financial institutions, high security projects could be even from guys like Boeing, etc. Those that were onshore, which is India, are being moved back to the US because companies can no longer guarantee security when people are working from home. So I think that has started to happen. I think so if you're in any of those high security financial services, government projects, defense, etc., then I think there could be an impact where your project is going to be moved back to their home countries. But apart from that, I think so far, and I know I've spoken to several people at various levels within India's IT organizations, and they're saying it's business as usual. Their biggest focus right now is productivity because it's not easy to have 200,000 people working from home and still getting stuff done. So that's where the biggest focus is, but this is what I have seen so far.
Great. Michael, if I go over to you, but could I ask one more question because it connects to something you mentioned? And Rajesh says, how can we as individual Indian companies take advantage of the anti-China, pro-India approach? Where do we start looking? So if you have any thoughts about that, we can certainly go back around on that question as well.
Just off the top of my head, apart from political sloganing, but really from a business case in trying to increase business, again, not knowing the type of company and which sector and size the company, top of head, I would say I would look at who's doing work in China today and where they may have some adverse experience. And so that's the first is, honestly, I would look at sort of the alternate, and those could be probably high probability targets where that they've had a breakthrough in terms of localization work in Asia, for example. And then you can really approach them to flip or to increase, maybe add secondary sources within India. I will say that, the thing that begets new business is success in current business. So what's important, that many companies see, and we see, is respect for the rule of law, respect for intellectual property in India. So, maintaining some of those, brand values, if you will, that, again, if it's not there, that's a really big deal. And this is one of China's big problems. and certainly in our sector. And so, it becomes a necessary tax to be able to sell, right? You can produce, etc. And thus far, that's a virtue that India has. So I think it's very important that India maintain and protects and values those, business attributes, which really is part of when I talk to my peers and other companies, how I explain to them. And, so I think that's a piece of it, is that they continue to market what are really some of the virtuous aspects of business in India. And I'll just make a couple other thoughts based on the dialogue. So in terms of digitization of government, apart from policy, but at the actual operations of government, still a really, really, really long way to go. As I say, India is cyber compliant because they didn't go online in the first place. Now, I say that, lovingly and a little jokingly. I have seen, a pivot, if you will, where, for example, many of my customers are government customers, and we're having virtual meetings. We're having work sessions like this, discussions, dialogues, things they never did before, just because they also want to keep things moving. And so, I'm hoping that these are some of the takeaways. They've figured out a way to do these things, in ways that don't challenge security, that work within their policy, etc. And again, like many of our businesses, we found different ways to work. It's not perfect, but I'm sure all of us have examples where we'd say, hey, if we could go back, in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months from now, everything's normal. What are the things we learned as a company and as individuals that we do want to maintain? And so I think the government is seeing a lot of those lessons right now as well. There was another comment I'll just say in analytics. Again, I think this will continue to be a massive strength for India in the future, and I think we'll be more resilient, as again a digital sector. But I just see as the world becomes more digital, this would just continue to be an outstanding growth area for India. It's a big leverage and really an influencer. I think, depending upon the products and sectors, the analytics space is something that gives you a lot of intelligence and a lot of idea of where trends are happening. And I think as that becomes more saturated across Indian industry, that will become an enabler for future growth.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael. I have one more question for Ravi. Which sectors are you funding venture capital or look promising currently other than online, education, gaming, and healthcare?
Right. So I think apart from those, I think we're looking at insurtech for sure, because what we saw in China was health insurance, specifically micro insurance, really skyrocketed post the COVID impact in China, because people got a lot more aware about health insurance. They want to buy health insurance. Insurance companies there micro-size the insurance package, so it was a lot more affordable. So we saw that happen in China, so we think that could happen here. But I think apart from that, I think we are investors with 3 to 5 year horizon. So while temporarily some of these sectors could be impacted, I think we're still open for business. We're still looking to make investments. So while temporarily we see an impact, but we take a 3 to 5 year view. So with that perspective, I think a lot more opens up in terms of sectors.
Great. And I know Nikki and Patrick, Pedro, everyone, our panelists, we don't want to be mindful. We're past the top of the hour. I'll just share a little bit about where we are with Thunderbird at ASU, how we're trying to advance. What I'd love to do, Nikki, is organize another webinar in the next 2 weeks, hopefully very soon, where we can really talk about the school more generally. We also have other webinars that we're going to really advance with respect to India specifically that you can see on the slide here. In terms of Thunderbird, I think many of you know, if not all of you know, we made 5 big moves since I joined Thunderbird. One was to take the very best of the past of Thunderbird and bring it back again. The iconic example of that is languages. We lost languages during the downturn. We brought them back. They're vibrant again. They're core to our programs, but there are many other things. The way I often talk about is the magical triangle: global business management skills, international affairs, international economics, international political economy, culture and languages as the heart and soul of the program side of Thunderbird. But in terms of the new, marrying the very best of the past and embracing the new, is very much a conversation that we're having here. digital transformation, Industry 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution. All of our programs now have a huge focus on technological transformation, and to our historic global mindset, which is still, and now even more so again than ever, so critical in this world. We've added a digital aspect, so a digital global mindset. And we're very proud of the curriculum transformation that's taken place, and all the student numbers are up. Just to kind of connect it, pre-COVID, all of our numbers were going up. We took a decent hit in terms of paused executive education programming, not surprisingly, as companies shut down and travel was restricted. But overall, I'll come back to, we're still looking at, we currently have about 1,000 students across our programs. And I'll say more about that in a second. We're looking still, and I'm cautiously optimistic, as Ravi rightfully pointed, there's second, third, fourth order effects and a lot of unknowns, as Nikhil and Michael confirmed. We're still looking at growth year over year going into fall 2020, which is remarkable when you think about what happened to Thunderbird post global financial crisis, albeit a very different type of a global challenge, and where we were. It looks like we will be the strongest performing unit across all of ASU. And if you look at where we started 3 years ago when I came in, we were completely on the other end. So the second big move we made was deep integration with ASU, as you all know, utilizing all the incredible assets of ASU, but inversely really being, as with Nikki in India, a real partner and a force for the broader event, and this partnership being really strong. So 2 examples of that in our MGM program, our Masters of Global Management program, which now, as you know, is ranked #1 with the Wall Street Journal again last year, 2019. We have incredible concentrations. There's now 17 concentrations students can do. Obviously, global business, marketing, finance, finance, strategy, and so forth, global entrepreneurship, global digital transformation, global affairs. But we have 12 other ones that are linked with our other sister schools across ASU. I want to mention, because there was a question, the latest one we just got approved was data analytics. So with the engineering school, you can now do data analytics as a concentration for your MGM. And so that's incredible, because we probably never could have done that as Thunderbird by ourselves, but now we can lean on this incredible engineering faculty across ASU. And because of that, I want to say, and I know this is important for all of us around the world, and certainly here at the school, but in India specifically, we're getting closer to potentially getting a STEM designation, which would be a game changer for us, right? That's a huge, huge thing given the current dynamics and the foreseeable future. So and the second example of deep integration with ASU is we really run executive education for all of ASU. So what's remarkable is we can draw on talent from bioengineering, from sustainability, from law, from policy, from virtually any faculty across campus, which makes us one of the few providers in the world that is completely transdisciplinary. Of course, we have still our fantastic Thunderbird faculty and network on that. So that's the second big move. A third big move has really been on taking Thunderbird to the world, as Nikhil, you mentioned, the idea of regional centers around the world. We started 25 years ago with Moscow. Moscow, the Center for Business Skills Development in Moscow celebrated its 25th year anniversary. They've trained 350,000 frontline professionals to mid-level managers over the last 25 years. It's the #1 training institute of all of Russia. We never really, that was sort of arm's length from the school. We didn't think of an integrated global strategy. What always surprised me is that Thunderbird taught the world to be leaders and managers and build global enterprises, but was not running itself as a global enterprise, as a global business. So in short form, the idea is to have regional centers of excellence around the world with a series of educational offerings, very light 21st century to start off with, being able to deliver, as Nikki was saying, in multiple modalities, from the bottom of the pyramid to executive education. And that's where we're really excited to advance in India. A fourth major move, of course, has been moving away from our historic campus. As I wrote in the chat, and Patrick can give you the link to the fly through of the new building. We have a brand new global headquarters we're constructing in downtown Phoenix. It continues to progress even during these times. It's 5 floors. It's going to be a spectacular home for the next 75 years of Thunderbird. It won't have the wonderful qualities, the global village qualities that Glendale did. There's no way that I can reconstruct that specifically, but we'll bring as much of that as forward. The traditions, regional nights, and the rugby team, and so much other are still with us, and many new traditions. We'll have the pub on the 5th floor, which was invoked many a time, and of course is even more the heart and soul of Thunderbird. So that's a huge part of the future. And then 5th really is, to reinvigorate our thought leadership and leadership in the world. I think many of you heard me, and I think the pandemic has only in many ways brought this in sharp relief. Thunderbird has always, from its founding, been a champion of an inclusive and prosperous globalism, sustainable and equitable prosperity, but one that brings the world together, that is borderless, borders frequented by trade, seldom needs soldiers. And so we've really invested a ton in our faculty and thought leadership and Globinars since the pandemic, and many other things to be able to shape the agendas, the business and policy agendas at the global stage. And the best example of that is the work we're doing with the World Economic Forum. And that continues to advance on shaping the 4th industrial revolution. So I want you all as Thunderbirds, as prospective Thunderbirds, I'll go to Ravi, Nikhil, and Michael for their last comments in a second, to be proud and confident in the school. We continue to do well. Like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic. The whole team has done an incredible job around the world. Amazing regional partners like Nikki and Dubai and Nairobi and Jakarta and Tokyo. We're going to launch in Mexico City and Sao Paulo this year, and hopefully Mumbai. We'll get there, I promise you. And that's going to be that global network with a phenomenal global headquarters in Phoenix. That's going to be Thunderbird in the world. You can join. We also have done, I should say, a big 5th part of our success over the last 2 years is bringing the Thunderbird Global Alumni together. We're all unified under the Thunderbird Global Alumni Advisory Council. We have T-Bird Connect, our new web platform app that you can connect. We have now 5,000 T-Birds on that. Please join, connect, chapters. When we get to travel again, you can search business opportunities, educational opportunities. So we've come a long way. We are resilient. As Michael said, Thunderbird is resilient. We're going to continue to be strong. We have this incredible backdrop of ASU, a lot of muscle there. And inversely, we provide ASU a ton. And our global brand and network, all of you, is thriving again. And so I'm grateful and optimistic. It's been a lot of work, I think, for all of us these last 3 months. We're all doing 3 jobs at the same time, and obviously living a new normal in terms of family life. So you can see that Patrick put in the Vimeo, and you can see the live cam view of construction in progress. We want to have further conversations about being much more active in a deep and profound and sustainable way in India, as with other places around the world, the key markets of the world. And you're all going to be critical to making that possible. So again, I want to stop. There's so much more I'd love to say. Just be proud and confident in the school, because not only we're going to survive this latest challenge with the pandemic, we're going to continue to thrive. But we'll do that best if we can continue to engage our alums around the world. I'll just give you one heartening thing for me. 2 weeks after the pandemic really hit the United States, 3 weeks maybe, we had a Thunderbird Global Alumni Advisory Council webinar, Zoom call, and we had 62 of we have a very large alumni network advisory council, and we'd welcome more of you from India joining. We had 62 people join that meeting, that virtual meeting, and commitments to help students with internships, recruit students, employment, give money to the new building, scholarships. It was phenomenal. So I'm really heartened by where we've come and feeling very confident that we will continue to grow as we go forward, including Nikhil. We'll have to have an offline. We're back in a very interesting partnership with Duck Becker and Santana, his new new endeavor. So there's some really so on that. But let me then go around last comments and just thank again everyone. It's great that we finally got this going. We will do many more of these. Please know, don't ever question. I think you know, just strategically, but personally, how much India means to me and to Thunderbird and ASU, but particularly to me. And you know, there's no question, there's no future of Thunderbird without a strong partnership with our Indian alums and doing great things in India and the subcontinent more generally. So let me go with you, Michael, and we'll go in reverse order to Michael, Ravi, and Nikhil for final comments. Michael?
Yeah, actually, again, I share the optimism. First, I'll start with India and say, you know, I think in the near term, it's going to be about compliantly, as I'll put it, safely, but opening the economy, not just some, as you see some other areas like in the US, it's just kind of stunning, this sort of deregulated free-for-all, and that won't be the case here. But nevertheless, you know, to be smart and innovative, but for the central government to give the states the appropriate signals that they can, right? I think that this becomes political in some respects, that states don't want to be seen sort of taking risks or having political vulnerabilities for being a little more innovative and permitting certain industries, for example, to be considered essential. Right? So that's what I look to, hopefully in the near term, really over the next 4 to 6 weeks to really see that. Really 4 weeks would be the best. It's phased, right? Smart. I just want to say to some of your information on Thunderbird and where it's going, you know, leading up to this webinar, I just got to ask a lot of questions of the team, and really I found myself very energized and excited about the direction of Thunderbird. So, you know, it's not just the good old days. Sometimes the pub was such a big feature because there was nothing to do in Glendale. It was quite a cow town, right? So, you know, if we, you know, are honest with ourselves, you have a lot of advantages being in the city, but you know, I just came away really excited about how, you know, it's about reforming, it's about refreshing, it's about applying our acumen to have something that's new and that is going to be survivable. We can't all do what we did 50 years ago for the next 50 years, right? So I just feel pretty fired up about what you're doing and your leadership and your tenure. So hats off. I'm looking forward to getting in and helping in any little way I can. And I'm sure there are many of my peers who will feel similar.
Thank you so much, Michael. The frame we thought about it is reclaiming, rebuilding, reinventing, and that's what we're doing. And so having you and others join, it's only going to make us stronger. Ravi, bye, please.
Yeah, I actually want to give a message to some of the current students who might be in school, graduating in the next 1 year, and might be losing all hope. The world is going into a recession. It's the end of the world. You're not going to get your dream job. Just to give you guys a sense, I graduated in 2009, which is less than 12 months after the Lehman Brothers collapse. Incredible tough time, but I can tell you those times brought the best out of me in terms of perseverance, hard work, patience, willing to go the extra mile, flexibility. And in the longer scheme of things, when you look back, you're pretty glad that you went through that because it brought a lot better out of you than before. So any current students out there who are listening, don't give up hope, but just work harder than you would have done before.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you for joining us. And I think that's part of also being a Thunderbird, having that resilience, right? And being able to succeed in difficult times. Over to you, Nikhil, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. I'll just be brief. I think, you know, 3 trends, if you look at the future, all positive trends. One, I think upskilling and reskilling. I think, Sanjeev, you referred to that. And by the way, I was involved with what used to be CBSD, Center for Business Development in Moscow. I think Thunderbird is to bring that into life now, because I think there is no other time than people will have to reskill or upskill or do different kind of skilling, right? And I look at the future when I speak to the customers, the gig economy, as we call it, maybe it's a gig or it's some hybrid gig, there'll be more and more freelancer work, right? Which is not a bad thing. So how do you become a good freelancer? You become a collection of different skills and capabilities, and maybe you don't work for one employer, you work for many employees, right? So I say think about that. And then I think the future of also working itself, I think Ravi mentioned, having been involved with WeWork, the co-working may be a different co-working now. It could be at home. It could be in, with different social distancing. So your work itself become more gig economy, and your workplace itself may become a very different environment, right? So as far as you think about those and get ready for those, I think you'll be extremely successful.
Thank you so much. And Jacob saying, and I want to thank Jacob for putting in all the T-Bird webinars. And tomorrow, Japan and Singapore will have their online T-Bird First Fridays. So we're still doing our virtual pubs, and we'll get back to the real pub, the new one, sooner rather than later. Thank you, dear friends. Look, Nikki, again, thank you to you and Petra and Patrick and everyone that organized this. We look forward to doing the future webinars, but also talking much more about Thunderbird in India. Please stay safe and healthy, everyone. That's our top priority for everyone during these times, physically and mentally, psychologically. So all my best. And as you can hear, my dogs are telling me it's time to go for a walk. All good best. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.